Thank you everyone for the introduction. We'll give now an opportunity to Norm to talk about this study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I provided a couple of handouts. I'm not going to go through every detail on these, but one is just kind of the listing of the tasks for the feasibility study that I believe you probably also got a more detailed description of the scope of work by email. The second page is a summary of estimated wastewater flows for different configurations of a service area, Woodacre Flats, lower extended to lower Woodacre, and then also with San Geronimo. And these numbers, the total parcel counts are from prior work that we had done, but looking at, we'll talk about this a little bit more. And then the last sheet in that three-page handout is a listing of our preliminary listing of the alternatives, wastewater alternatives that we'll be examining in this feasibility study. So the other handout is some background information that's taken out of the initial feasibility study that was done in 2011. Some of the background information that inspections and evaluations of systems that was done under what was called the Septic Matters program that the county had going in the 2004 to 2008 period of time. Some water quality testing, surface water sampling that was done by Tamales Bay Watershed Council in 2006, 2007, and 2008. And then a summary of the work that Questa had done in the initial Woodacre wastewater feasibility study that related to review of permit records and septic system information on file in the county, and then field reviews. We did, I believe, 33 voluntary field reviews of properties in the Woodacre Flats area. So that's just background information that you can refer to as we go through the session today or look at separately. But just why are we doing the study or what the background is. So back after some of the studies have been done and the attention was brought to the issues in the lower portions of Woodacre, the Woodacre Flats group was formed. In 2009, we were contracted with by the county to conduct a wastewater feasibility study that ended in this report. And initially, we were looking at the Flats area and looking for some type of locally based solution. This was kind of following the successful implementation of the community collection and leach field system for the Marshall project out on the east shore of Tamales Bay, which was completed in 2008. But going through, so we were looking at areas where maybe something like that could be replicated for the problem areas within Woodacre and the Flats. And that led to consideration of a larger array of options, and the owners of the golf course at the time attended one of the early meetings, expressed an interest in making the course available, this property available for locating a treatment plant, ponds for winter storage of treated wastewater, and then recycling or reuse of the treated water on the golf course to lower their costs, need for raw water purchases from MMWD. So as we went through the feasibility study, we did find and develop the ways to implement a local solution for Woodacre using an area, a hillside area up above on Fire Road area. And but through the study, the interest in the golf course, in water recycling, got the most attention. It had the ability to serve more properties, put more water to beneficial, more wastewater to beneficial reuse. And after the completion of the study, It also generated some additional funding and interest from the State Water Resource Control Board, funding for water recycling programs, and that led to a follow-on study to look at initially it was just a pond on this side of the golf course. It was expanded in subsequent studies to look at ponds on the backside of the golf course and expanding the surface area to also consider bringing in properties in San Geronimo. And so that work was completed, but then with the sale of the golf course and then the closure of the golf course, that solution, was no longer viable. So the study now is to go back to where we were with our initial findings from the study, looking at a land-based local alternative, but possibly something that expanded beyond the Woodacre area, just depending upon what we're able to develop. That would not include the former golf course area, although it might come down and provide service to this building or to this property. So that's the focus of the study. It's picking up on what was called Alternative 3 in the initial study. And the work kind of begins with looking at the service area, and that's what the second page is. And so what I've done there is just provide for you just a ballpark number of how many parcels are the flats, the lower portions of Woodacre, if it's expanded to include the flats and some other areas of Woodacre where there was interest expressed in being part of a community wastewater solution. And then if it were expanded, which we looked at before, up to 360 parcels, including the Woodacre and San Geronimo areas. I've indicated here, so we have an idea of how much wastewater flow we're talking about using a flow of 125 gallons per day per parcel. That's not what you use to design an individual septic system, but when it's a community system, the facility receives and processes and handles the average flow from whatever that service area is. And 125 looking at systems that have been monitored in Marin County, elsewhere, French Ranch, Marshall, Dillon Beach, and so forth. 125 gallons per day per parcel is the estimate that we'd start with here. And then what I've shown in this table is the project that we're considering, which is the way we approached it in Marshall, is not mandatory hookup of every property that happens to be in the service area, because some properties can manage with their septic systems and others are in dire straits. But looking at if that was 100%, 75 or 50%, what the flows are. So this gives us an idea of the kind of the range of what is is potentially generated depending upon how you define that service area. And then separately, we're looking at defining how we can treat and process, dispose of, or reuse that wastewater flow as we look at different alternatives. So the last sheet in this handout is kind of the preliminary outline of the things that we're looking at. And just as we did before, we through the field surveys that we did, the records and knowledge of this soil, groundwater, and other conditions, we had estimated what it would take to upgrade the septic systems under a managed program. And so this is either called an on-site wastewater management district or management zone. It's something allowed for under the state codes, the health and safety code. And a place that does this in Marin is Stinson Beach. If you're not familiar with that, that's kind of been a long, that was the model that ultimately resulted in adoption in the state code of a program that allows for oversight and management under locally or customized standards. And that would be the idea under alternative 1 here. The on-site management program would be to establish some public oversight which then opens up the possibility for funding, but also the ability to customize the way systems are designed, how they're monitored. Maybe it includes some water quality monitoring in the area to confirm that the program is effective, and it may open then the doors for using certain technologies that otherwise aren't in common use throughout the county, putting gray water systems into use, designing the systems not based upon a bedroom count, but on a water use factor that is more realistic. Maybe putting in 100% rather than requiring dual system, dual 200% leach field system, those sorts of things. And then there are other technologies that since 2010, there hasn't been a lot of change in what can be done, especially to deal with the types of problems that you have in the Woodacre flats, which is clay soils, high groundwater, poor drainage, water table or saturated conditions within a couple of feet of surface in some areas, not all areas. But there are some improvements in technology or some options, and so that's part of that effort, is to provide a fresh look at, is there something on the table that is now in use or available to us that we didn't consider 10, 12 years ago. Then the other focus of the study will be looking at a community system option. Again, the focus being on the fire road leach field area that we had evaluated and determined to be feasible based upon a number of soil profile test bits, look at the geology, slopes, and drainage, and so forth. But we propose to be doing a follow-up work, perhaps expanding somewhat the area that we initially had identified, but also doing percolation tests and doing that during this coming wet weather season. So we have a look at the conditions under what would be having to operate under. And we looked at, we'll be looking at 3 different ways to perhaps utilize that area. One with primary treatment, where it's just septic tank effluent going to the leach field. Second, where we have some sort of a secondary treatment process that reduces solids and allows for greater capacity of the same amount of leach field as a system where we were just getting septic tank effluent. And then the other option would be tertiary treatment. That's taking it to a level of treatment where it could be, let's say, discharged to the leach field in the winter and then put to irrigation use in different areas, maybe here, maybe in some pasture areas during the dry season. So it takes the load off of the leach field, puts the water to some beneficial use, and that would be with the tertiary treatment, including higher level of filtration and then disinfection of the treated water. And one of the things, let's see, I forgot to mention is that we had, in our prior study, we looked at different ways of collecting the wastewater, the sewage from homes in the flats area, or however that larger surface area would be configured. And we believe pretty strongly that using a septic tank effluent system, where septic tanks are retained and you're collecting just the effluent rather than directing it to a leach field on the property, you're collecting it to a common leach field or to another treatment system, has strong advantages due to the ability to have a tight, watertight collection system without manholes, without gravity sewers that allow high groundwater to infiltrate, to surcharge the system in wet periods. That's something that when you're treatment system and your disposal options are limited in the wintertime, that can be avoided by putting in a septic tank effluent collection system, and which we initially scoped out in the first phase some years ago, and believe that should be the approach going forward. I think I've pretty much covered the types of alternatives we're looking at, and we'll be formalizing these. And I think with the field work happening this winter and some of the other information coming together, we should be having a pretty good definition of alternatives by sometime in January, which would probably be a good time to reconvene with outreach programs to look at those with with a little bit more specificity, where things are, what capacity can be provided, and then go through the other aspects of our scope of work, which is putting costs to those and doing a comparative review of the different alternatives, soliciting input through some sort of a questionnaire that we're going to be developing, and then we'll be distributing for community input, and then coming to a conclusion. We're not going to be picking an alternative. We're going to be putting a number of different options and showing the pros and cons of those, and as we've done before, and typically we'll go through a number of different criteria, from construction cost, operating costs, apparent environmental issues, the impacts to land use, the compliance with regulatory requirements, those, and just kind of the operation and maintenance needs, and do some ranking just to get a rating of the alternatives on different criteria, just as a point of reference and for discussion. But we're not picking the alternative. Ultimately, it's the community or the service area that would be defined, and the people within that service area that ultimately would if it's a community collection and treatment system, they would be required to form an assessment district. That's a funding district to finance the local share, to obtain grants to build the project. So I'll take questions, but I think that covers the information I wanted to present.
Yeah, I don't want to talk all the time here, but I'd like to delve into each one of these a little bit more. It might not take that long, but let me just...
Okay, all right.
Okay, so updated technology options, I'm assuming that's a code-approved septic tank and like a RENCO after treatment system?
So there, certain technologies are built into the county code, and there are others that are maybe not in the county code that have evolved recently, and if they make sense to include those, yeah.
Okay, and then would that possibly include subsurface irrigation?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
and then the gray water system, how would that fit into an on-site system? Would there be a separate tank for that?
Okay.
Pump, or?
There's a broad spectrum of what a gray water system can be. Gray water is laundry water, shower, bath, hand sinks. It's not toilets. It's not kitchen water. Okay, and that's in the state code. You can go to the code. Certain things you can do without a permit. Yeah, but it's not. The code allows for gray water systems for mulch basins, for drip irrigation, and also just disposal. You can, the code clearly lays out criteria where you can put your gray water into a separate system to take the load off of your septic tank system.
But in this scenario of an on-site improvement management district, how would the gray water system, how would you envision the gray water system on a specific lot being? I mean, there'd be this sewer system or the septic system, and then what would the gray water system be? Would it be a separate tank for pumps? Where would it pump the water to? How much water would it store?
Yeah, it could be a gravity system, but it also could be a pump system with some treatment. You can put, we've worked on systems where people have a shower. We're running it through a planter bed. It's like a constructed, well, it's like a contained planter bed with vegetation where that's how the water is used, and it takes the load off of the septic system.
Any estimates at this point on what size storage system we would have to handle a gray water system in winter and summer? Or is that down the road?
What's that, a storage system?
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
right now
Yeah.
it sounds all pretty loosey-goosey, but if it
Right.
happens, the county and the state are going to dial it in real tight. So I'm assuming there'll be some figure for how many gallons per day and how it will be distributed.
Yeah, well, what we did before is we took some we laid out some typical examples, and that's what we would propose to do here. And we'll include what if you had a gray water system, how would that, how could that be constructed? You can't take gray water and store it in the winter and expect to use it in the summer.
Right.
That's not permitted because it just goes rancid. You could perhaps treat it and store it for a short period of time, but you can't just store all your gray water and think it's something good to
But
have.
if you're pumping it in the wintertime when the plants don't need it, what are you going to do with it?
If you have conditions that allow for disposal of the gray water, you can
If your
dispose
ground
it. You
table's low
can
enough.
dispose it year round if you have the right
If you have the right
conditions.
ground table.
Yeah.
Okay.
And gray water can be designed to occupy a smaller amount of, or require a smaller amount of leaching trench. They have a different design criteria than a regular leach field. So that's where it might make sense. So,
It can be used for the toilet flushing.
pardon?
Toilet flushing. Can they use it?
Toilet flushing is not to the gray water. Yeah.
But they can
The water.
use it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, the highest level you could go to a treatment system that would recycle the water for toilet flushing. There are also commercial products that it's a company in Canada that it seems like they have a pretty efficient system. Takes shower water, bath water, recycles it for toilet flushing, and it's what's called NSF, National Sanitation Foundation approved. So it's a certified system that can be used, but it has to fit into the house plumbing system.
Yeah, so to sum it up in plain layman's terms, it's like buying a car. You buy a car and then there's all the options like this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
there,
the-
yeah.
What
yeah.
gray water is.
Right,
And it
yeah.
all costs more. They're all options that cost more.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I yield. Anybody else?
Just, can you, the fire road leach field location system, can you just remind me where that is?
Okay, so it's if you're in downtown Woodacre, you're heading up Railroad and you turn to the left, look up on the hill. It's on the other side of that ridge up there, okay? And it's not on the side of the would be the south side, I guess, that drains down to Woodacre. That's unstable land on that side. The other side is deep weathered sandstone. So it's in the forested area over that ridge.
And is that privately owned land, or is that?
It's owned by the Dixon
Okay.
Ranch. Yeah.
And would that, just one more question on that, so would that require public condemnation, or would they have to take that land from Dixon? Or?
Well, okay, so they granted us access to explore that option before. So if it worked out, then it would be acquired, or an easement would be acquired. So yeah, it's not proposed to be, eminent domain isn't under consideration. It's all with agreement.
So that's a condition of all the fire road systems is having the Dixon Ranch
Yeah.
come to some kind of
Right,
terms?
yeah. If they've had a change of heart about that, then, or look at what's proposed and say, well, that's too much or something. But yeah, so that is part of the.
Just as a note for the record, I spoke to Grace this morning, and she hasn't talked to anybody yet
Yeah,
about
right,
all
yeah.
this, and so it
Right.
seems only right that somebody should be talking to her.
Right, yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah, she just.
we're
no,
up renewing that, yeah.
So I have a question with regard to alternative one, that's the on-site. Are you all familiar with it? Because you said you were exploring, or that option includes the possibility of new technology and things that weren't available, you know, to me. Are you familiar with or working with some of the stuff that OAEC has been doing over the last maybe 10 years, maybe 8 years, in terms of working with viable septic systems and creating more friendly technology? Are you familiar with their work?
I didn't understand, who was it that you were?
Occidental Ecology, what is it?
Art and Ecology Center, OAEC.
Okay, I'm not,
Yeah, they do, they've done a, was their pioneer studying on a septic system, or kind of a composting system or something?
Kind of, but it's been expanded. The Sonoma supervisors were very interested in that, and it expanded it to a larger part of Sonoma County. It's a system that is either has been or is being considered by the state. And I think it would be worthwhile, if you have not been in contact with them, to reach out to them.
sure, yeah, we're happy to look at any and everything that is, is out there that has capability to deal with the conditions, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be good.
Yes.
I apologize. Like I said, I heard about this meeting last night, so I haven't had time to put together really thoughtful questions, but I've got about 10 that bubble to the surface. One is an observation. I look back about 10 years since I've been following all these different studies, and this study looks very much like a lot of studies we've done in the past. It seems to be an update in many areas. And I'm looking at that $120,000 price tag. And one of the things that goes through my mind is how that $120,000 could be used to upgrade existing septic systems versus another study. And where does this study fit in the long litany of studies that are going to be necessary before a project actually gets underway? It seems like a large number, just an observation. Second thing, speaking of adding things new to this study, I've talked to a number of folks over the years, including folks in the Woodacre Flats whose septic systems are working fine. And I've never seen a study that differentiates a septic system that's working fine versus one that isn't working fine, even though they're both in the Woodacre Flats. And I'd love to see some indication of what makes one work and what makes one not work. If it's just a question of maintenance and paying attention to what you've got and having it pumped, those are easier solutions than a community wastewater system. The third thing is I get a little bit of the willies when I think of the difference between wastewater, a small amount of wastewater that's on site versus a combined amount of wastewater that's pumped throughout the community, in which everybody has a chance of getting affected by that communal wastewater. And I've never seen that actually teased out and turned into whether it's an issue or not. And I'm not looking for answers to any of this right now, I'm just laying this out. The fourth thing is, the other thing that gives me a little bit of the willies is a centralized system, which I understand from previous studies will be managed by amateurs. There might be somebody with a bell that goes off in their house when the central plant has, started putting out fumes, but I don't know who in the community is really qualified to manage a system like this. So that's another thing I'd like to see this study talk about. A fifth thing is, when I think about some of the things I read about since the last study I saw, they're getting into PFAs and biologics, which, even the water district doesn't want to bother with treating, how can a small system like this deal with spreading PFAS around the community as opposed to keeping it localized? Let me see if there's anything else. And I think probably one of the important things is, where does this Woodacre flat system and the failing septic systems fit into the whole valley, of which I'm a member, not just Woodacre, in terms of other failing systems elsewhere in the valley that might need more urgent remediation than some of the systems in the Woodacre flats? So those are maybe a few observations in the last hour that I put together. And like I said, I don't expect comment on all of them now, but I do think the scope of the study really should address some of these things.
Okay, I mean, I can comment on some of them. I just wanted to, I wasn't sure if I followed you were talking about the responding to bells, and were you talking about the step system?
I think what the last I saw is there would be like some kind of a pump plan by the Dixon Ranch, and there'd be some kind of collection and all of this, where any collective area where suddenly you've got 50 households worth of sewage as opposed to one by one.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to pay attention to that. If there's a smell that drifts through the valley, somebody's phone is going to ring. Who is that going to be?
Sure.
And what qualifications do they need to have to pick up the phone and say, hello, how can I help you?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the best that I can do for you there is to point you to the Marshall system. It has, they serve 50 or 60 parcels, 70. Each house with a septic tank and a pump system, a collection line along Highway 1 there, right at Marshall.
Gene and I went out there and looked at that,
Yeah, and so that has a lot of bells and was a lot of pumps to it.
Yeah.
They have a contract operator who is certified by the state, and it's required for a community system. It's required by the State Water Board to have a certified operator. And they have some portions of the system are accessible by remote telemetry, and they respond to the alarms that are called in, as well as those that they detect remotely. They service the treatment system, the common facilities, the leach field system. They do the testing, the reporting. So that's for a group of 60, 70 properties there, and that would, we're looking at, larger than that probably with this study, but that's that is workable, and it's good that it's right in the county. So there's questions you have, or concerns about how they're doing it. They're right on Tamales Bay with that system there, so I think that's a point of reference to dig into or get more familiar with. Yeah. Let's see, your other questions about, so the question about the contaminants, that are showing up in wastewater systems. I guess part of my response to that is if you have a lot of individual systems, that are problematic or have to, within poor drainage areas, you can have multiple sources all combining or all generating that. If you're collecting it, granted, you're going to put it all in one place, but you have more control and the ability perhaps to treat it. So that's one of the trade-offs. But I think that the question about putting it all together, if you have a big failure versus lots of little failures, which is that is the trade-off. And there's with a community system, you have a certified operator. You have the ability to do more in terms of treatment. If you're working with 50 houses, the technologies that you have available and the oversight you have is better than if you have 50 individual treatment systems trying to operate. So those, that's kind of why a community system, can be as effective as septic systems. But if you've got the right conditions, and in our study we did, and will continue to present that information. You saw from the estimate of flows, we looked at different levels of participation, because we recognize, and we do lots of septic systems. It's not like we're just a community wastewater company. That's not. We do more septic systems than we do, and so we're familiar, and we are comfortable and confident that when you have the right conditions, there's nothing wrong with continuing to operate a septic system. But in our study, we did recognize, and when we went about looking at the on-site wastewater management approach, the first alternative we talked about, looking at different costs that would be required, or different levels of oversight depending upon what in our review of the conditions, how many properties fall into a category where they've got good soil conditions and or code compliant tanks and leach field systems, or larger properties versus those that are in the flats where the water table is a few feet from the surface throughout a lot of the winter, and their toilets don't flush. And so there is that. I think we brought that out in our study before, but we'll make sure to do that again.
So to that question, as I recall, that there is no definitive, or the ability to do a definitive house-by-house study. It's all by permission of the homeowners. The county can't go in and just say, we're going to test all the septics in this area. There are issues of privacy and property rights and all that. Is that my understanding correct?
Yeah. So the approach that we took in Marshall, and the approach that we feel should be followed also in this study here, and we've done this in other areas as well, is if you have a step system and you have an area of septic systems where some are going to be fine, but you've got a lot of problematic areas, or some problematic areas, you can put in a collection system that doesn't take every house down the street, because it's just small pipe you're running down, and you don't have to pay for a big sewer line, so you don't have to make sure that everybody is part of it. So running the pipelines are much reduced in cost when you have that. So you can have a system that takes every other house on a block, if in fact those are the ones that need the collection. So
there's no way to do an analysis, a definitive analysis of the Woodacre flats, and how many of those systems fall into that category, or to Phil's point, how many of, there's 10 systems that are failing and 100 that are good.
Right.
There's no way to get those definitive numbers. That's my understanding. Is that
right? What we did before is that we weren't going to publish any specific information on anyone's property. Nobody wanted to participate if there was all their dirty laundry, so to speak, was going to be in the report. So we indicated which properties we looked at, and we put in general.
Right, but you looked at it as a volunteer basis, correct?
Yeah, and that was.
You can't go through and say.
So we had a pretty good cross-section throughout, like 33 systems,
right,
that we made a field review of, and that was just to make sure we had a sense of, okay, if we do an on-site repair here, what's it going to entail? What's it going to cost? How many of those do we have, and how many? They've got already a good conditions to work with. What percentage of the houses are in that category?
So basically, when we can't or don't want to do a definitive study of all the homes, and
yeah.
So I'm saying that that's true. That's not going to happen, or isn't.
Right. So
can't. I think it's the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if say you go down that path with the solution, and you say, okay, we're going to put in a collection system, and we can handle so much flow, and that's about 75% or whatever it is of the, and we want to include everyone who believes they need it, and it's kind of, in a way, it's leaving it up to the homeowner, say, yeah, I need it, and if I if I'm not connected to the system, I'll manage my septic system, and they have to feel confident that they're ready to do
It's
that.
more
You'd have
about-
to prove
yeah.
to the county that you can manage your system. You'd have to prove to the county you can manage your system.
Well-
The county's not going to take your word for it. They're going to come and inspect it.
Well, that's not what we did in Marshall.
Well, yeah, I know, but
but-
last time, like a month before the whole thing fell apart, I remember talking to Rebecca Hing, and she said, oh yes, we're going to inspect every property to make sure that the tanks work. So somebody wants to opt
Really?
out, they can only opt out if their system's up to par.
Well, I think we approached it differently, and I think that's the way the study will, or the options will be presented, is that it's if you don't, if you choose to be included, then you're in the assessment district. If you decide I've got enough land, I'm fine. Then it's really, they're on their own, basically. So if they have a problem, then they have to deal with their problem. But if they're connected up, so it leaves it to the homeowner, not to the county.
So I have a question, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on something you were saying, Dave, and also Ken, which is, so, I mean, you have some assumptions here, 100%, 75%, 50%. Well, suppose it's 20% that want to hook up or something like that,
Yeah.
and form an assessment district. Obviously, the cost to each hookup is going to be more.
Right.
So at what point does it become not economically smart? In other words, if it cost me, let's say I had to put in a new system, and I could do it, I'm just going to make up numbers here. It cost me $50,000 to do my own system. It's in, it's done, it's taken care of. But I say, no, I'll be part of the assessment district, but there's only 20 houses that are joined into that assessment district. How is that going to affect what I actually pay and my ongoing cost? Because I presume that the people who are part of the assessment district are going to have to cover the cost of the consultant, the monitor, the person who's doing, the on-site guy. So at what point does it become not cost effective for me to be part of this?
Well, I guess, so these were just hypothetical, 50, 75, 100. We can look at 30%, 40%. It's a matter of, once we have a particular pipeline route or area defined, it's really a matter of just calculating a length of pipe or the length of leach field and so forth, and those costs. But you're right, the cost per parcel will go up the fewer parcels included in that, sharing that cost. So, but those numbers, if that's where it looks like it's going, we can generate those numbers.
Yeah, I sure would want to know that before I decided to participate.
Yeah, that's why it's really important for us to do the background, like we are going to do the questionnaire or something where we are going to put all those questions so that we can see that kind of interest into it, and background information and data is very important for us. That's why we kept on saying it's a data-driven project in the sense that we would like to know how many parcel owners, homeowners are really interested in hooking up to the system, or they are really. So
but I'd want to know some numbers before I
Yeah,
make
so-
a commitment. I mean,
so,
I
yeah,
didn't, sure,
yeah,
I'll do
yeah.
it, and then I find out it's 100,000.
Yeah, that's why so Norm, that's why he mentioned that a couple of months he's going to go and dig into some more background information, getting data, and see if it's feasible and how we are going to move that. So for that, he needs something.
And will that also include the analysis of, like I said, about the OAEC alternative or others, like you have an alternative one, so that I could sit there as a homeowner and I could say, okay, well, if it's alternative one, it might be this much. If it's alternative two, or if it's alternative three, and different numbers. I mean, obviously, if it's alternative one, it's just me. So it's a flat, this is what it would cost me. But these are options in that alternative one, from conventional to more contemporary. If it's an alternative 2 or 3, here's the difference, you know. If it's me and Ken that want to join it, whoa, maybe I don't want to participate. So, I mean, we have to have more solid numbers and not just hypotheticals. I mean, at some point, obviously, we can't have it yet, but we're going to have that.
That's the word feasible in the feasibility study, I think. But can it be done?
And played down to small numbers too, so we don't make assumptions.
It's got to have the detail.
Yeah, the devil, as they say.
So in option 1, where you talk about the state OWTS policy and county lamp implications. So anybody who doesn't join in the project would still be under the state policies and the lamp, right?
Well, yeah, the state policy and the lamp applies, yeah. The state policy applies across the whole state, so, and in the county,
And so aren't there inspection requirements that the state is requiring the county to start doing around septic systems?
No, so you can have, within alternative 1, you can have,
Yeah.
you can have basically a no, you know, I mean, I guess I should have listed no project, which is basically status quo, which is everyone for themselves. And some of those, if you have a failure or if you're doing remodel or whatever, then you have to, the work has to be permitted, and that permit may not be just the construction, but an operating permit. So in a way, it comes under a monitoring or an oversight if you've got a property that requires an advanced or alternative system under the county's oversight. So that would be the status quo. And under the alternative, where you have an on-site management program, you could define that. I mean, you could have a hybrid here where some parts, the worst properties got connected, and maybe it's only 20 or 30% to some community system because they simply can't meet any reasonable standards on the property. Some properties were under maybe a management oversight where that you had the advantage maybe of getting financing under some authority, and maybe some are just in the status quo and they're not under any additional oversight because they're just fine the way they are. So that's a hybrid that could.
But when you say they're just fine the way they are, what about the ones that are failing and choose not to put in their own system and choose not to join? Aren't there going to be inspections? Isn't there going to be something to make sure that our streams aren't polluted?
Yeah, like if environmental staff went out and they chose not to.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, if there was a failure, yeah, we would be able to follow up and have them fix the system.
What would a follow-up look like? What would that be? Your neighbor would call the police, the environmental health fund and say they're polluting the creek?
It'd either be by complaint or us in the field seeing that there's a failure. Yeah. So, and that's been pretty consistent throughout the county.
So how many of those complaints do you get per month of somebody's septic system possibly failing?
I'm saying maybe 2 or 3.
A month?
So when we walk down the street and smell sewage, do we call you and say, we don't know which property it is, but there's sewage in it?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we can do different tracking things, tracking dyes. There's ways we've done some really interesting problem solving. So yeah, you can absolutely call it.
I gotta say, my biggest fear in this whole situation, and I was very gung-ho doing this at the beginning, and we got our systems looked at. I can tell that I have neighbors with systems that are failing, and I look at Liz and Eugene. Ken, you know, but you guys down the street from me, they are $150,000 into rebuilding a septic system, surrounded by, you know, I don't mean right next door necessarily, but maybe failing septic systems, and they still haven't been able to pass their system through the county. I mean, I don't have $150,000 I want to spend on.
Or a spare quarter acre.
Yes, well, I have a spare quarter acre. I could make it the whole quarter acre a septic system and not build a house on it. It has a house on it, but I don't live there, so I could just make it entirely a septic system and spend $150,000.
Right.
So that would be like, I don't know, the property's worth maybe $500,000 plus $150,000 for a system, so I have a $650,000 septic system sitting there. I could do that.
Right.
I'm not going to. I'd like to try to do this at small scale. It feels like it could work. I don't know. It seems like a no-brainer to me.
If Jean wants to go ahead, I just have a really quick thank you for putting this together. And one quick question. 10 years ago when we were looking at similar studies, I think it was mentioned that the average annual cost to belong to this district, this may be a question for you, Arti, was $1,000 a year.
Yes.
Do we know what Marshall's payment now is for their system? Has it gone up or is it still $1,000?
So, yeah, it's like 1,300, and then we have the CPI, cost price index, every year, and then certain percentage, for example, whatever for the current 2022, it was like 5%, so we'll increase a marginal increase to that.
So net as of today, what would the number be that they're paying?
So $1,300?
$1,300.
Yeah, $1,300.
$1,300,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And that takes care of the maintenance of the system.
That's what?
That
Maintenance.
takes maintenance of the system.
The maintenance,
Maintenance
yeah,
of-
that's the annual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, so if you have not signed up sheet, because for me, the challenge was, this is our first time, this in-person meeting, right? So we were not able, I wasn't aware of all the listserv, but if you did not hear, I would really appreciate the sign-up sheet, because that's our way of communicating to all of you. And we are also in the process of developing the website, and on the website we will be giving you the updates about the project and everything. So please sign up here, and we will keep in touch with all of you.
And I see Jean with her hand up too. I don't know if you can see her.
Okay, yes, please, yes. Sorry, I'm
A
sorry.
couple of things.
Okay.
My hearing isn't as good as it used to be, and I'm delighted at some of the questions, in particular coming from people immediately affected and have been for years. But my first thing is, I'm very interested in knowing what department requested this new wastewater feasibility study. How did this come about, that you're doing this? Where did it come from?
So,
Go ahead, Arti.
yeah, I'll start, but then Norm can do,
Yeah.
because Norm was part of from the beginning itself, right? This is not something very new. It was in 2004, 2005, I think, when the first time they saw higher elevated level of bacterial contamination in the creeks.
No, but this is
But
today.
you're just,
I
what,
want to know,
Oh,
it came from the community,
From
from
the
the
com-
Woodacre Flats.
it came from the community?
Yes.
What part of the community?
Well, they'd been, started, already, was talking about, had started 10, 12 years ago or before that in the mid.
No, but I'm talking
And-
about, we're here today.
Right.
What group got you to pull this thing, to start this new process here today? Where did it come from?
Well, yeah, it came from the Woodacre Flats group, who had.
Recently?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
atmospheric river last year was kind of an
I think
eye-opener.
they never left the study. They've been always, so my predecessor, I believe I came in 2019, and Lauren was actively working during that time on this project. And part of it that they contributed, I think around $38,000 towards this study itself. They contributed that amount of money in starting the feasibility study. So they were actively involved in this project, and it's always ongoing process. It never stopped. Because of the COVID, we were a little bit, and we didn't have resources at the time, and there was this COVID where everything kind of stopped. So we stopped for a couple of months, but we were actively working all the time. So this never stopped actually.
It's mainly this group. I wish I could hear better. Hearing aids have not been very helpful. They're just a pain nuisance. So thank you for that response. I noticed in the comments, though, that you had indicated that Valley groups, that you contacted Valley groups, and that they were helpful, evidently, in where you went in terms of providing this new proposal. And I imagine, is that this group here?
Woodacre
Basically?
Woodacre San Geronimo Flats
Yes,
wastewater
that's right.
group.
So basically, it's you folks. I mean, that's good, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I want to be
We
clear
got donations
about
from the
that.
community to pay for this project.
What?
We got donations from the community to pay for this project. And so the county has had $38,000 of community money to keep this project going.
Interesting. Okay. And that money was for a wastewater facility?
It was for a community
Depending
solution.
on what they came up with.
It was for a community solution to failing wastewater systems.
Solution. Okay, and would you say this is a community solution?
But there's these possibilities here, that these are all possible community solutions. There's, 6 different,
Yeah.
these are community solutions.
Yeah, it's a struggle, and I know that in 2001, I wrote the letter supporting that, something be done for you folks. And that's been many, many years ago. We were the only organization that wrote a letter in support of that, and still feel strongly that you need the help that you want. And I regret the time that it's taken to get to just where we even are today.
It's been like 20 years.
I mean, it's just the frustration. I mean, I hear it. And this is not the only issue that we're dealing with, actually. But I would like to do something. I'd like to just show you something. There was a plan, I'll be brief. There was a plan to put a AWIPS, the Advanced Integrated Wastewater Pond System. This is what it looked like, and it was planned to be built next to the school at the corner of Sir Francis Drake and Lagunitas School Road. That's where it was planned to build.
I was on the school board then.
I don't know if any of you remember that. Your name might be on here. But people were extremely, in the valley, went nuts. It didn't take a lot of organization to get people to sign up their names saying no system, wastewater system, at this site next to the school. They were adamant. And we were organized and we killed it. And I just want you to know that there are people in the valley are very sensitive about the impacts of any wastewater system, whether it was on the golf course, whether it's a Dixon Ranch, or wherever it is. It isn't just the people that are immediately affected. It's everyone else who feel it impacts the rural quality of the valley and what they intend to preserve and protect. I'm one of those people. The only way you're going to get rid of me when I'm 6 feet under. That's the only way, and that time is coming. But there are new people who care as much as I do about keeping the valley rural, about making sure of anything that's proposed, we know where it's coming from. We want community input that are directly affected, and broad community input. So everybody has a chance to say, oh yeah, they can dump it, or they can say, oh, I do care about that. When's the next meeting? And that's where people like me come in. We want people to know. I want to know their latest, if they've changed their minds. I want to hear the frustration that it's gone on so long, so I can help if I can help. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood. There's a lot of people here. Well, half of them are dead. I think I've outlived a lot of them, but that's another story. Thank you. I'm interested, did this come from the department? Did this come from Redoni? Where, why, what got you here? What got you here?
Love for you.
What?
I love for you guys.
You what?
I love.
Our love.
I love.
You know, 'cause we
Yes,
saw,
yes.
That's not an answer.
It's like Norm,
She's trying to deflect me here.
It's just been a bunch of neighbors meeting in living rooms. It's just
Say
not-
loud.
It's just been a bunch of neighbors meeting in living rooms. That's really all it's been. We meet at each other's houses. This has not been, this is the first meeting we've had in how long? 5, 10 years? I don't know.
Oh, no.
yeah, so it's nice to be able to kind of re-energize, you know, whether it's the funding from the floods or coming from the county. You know, we see the need. The best part about, I think, about what Norm is doing now is it's still just a feasibility report to where we can put options on the table. And there can still be, you know, the input and the comments and the, you know, eventually having mailers going out to everybody to where we can see, you know, what are the costs and benefits. And the one page that Norm had in terms of, you know, what would be the service levels. So, you know, if there's concern from a certain group to where they may not want to join, you know, that would be part of the report. And we would all take that into consideration, whether it's 90% or 30%. And that's decisions that we could, you know, make on the table. So,
But here's what disturbs me. Not that there isn't a need, that's not the problem. Because I think there is, and I think that something's got to be done. And I don't think people should spend $150,000.
They already have.
No, I know
And
they
it's
have.
not done.
No, I know that, that's what I mean. I think it was appalling at 100,000. So it's not that part, it's like this, like, okay, we're gonna have a meeting at 10 o'clock this morning, but only with this group, nobody else can come. That's not a community meeting.
That was
But
one
it
meeting.
wasn't supposed to be a community meeting.
Well,
It was
that's not
supposed-
how it was presented,
It was
so
supposed to be,
okay.
it was supposed to be just the wastewater flats group who has been working on this for
Right.
over
Yeah, it wasn't
15 years.
presented.
But it wasn't presented
Yeah, I
that way,
don't wanna
so
spend a
no,
bunch of time
no,
on
it.
it's
It
not
was
a,
not
it's not
presented.
pointing fingers, I'm just saying going
Yeah.
forward, if you will really want community involvement and community that supports a positive outcome for everybody. Nobody is sitting here saying, oh, well, let's just keep things the same and destroy everything, you know?
yeah.
Nobody wants that,
Right.
okay? But realize that you've got a whole, and it's not just Woodacre, I mean, that's what Kim was talking, and Dave was talking about, that this is the whole valley.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Agreed.
So it's really important not to silo things, because that's when you do get problems, and you do get issues, and you do get confusion,
Right.
and you get anger that doesn't need to be there.
Agreed.
Right, I agree, yeah, so, yeah, was our first meeting, but in future, we will have like better outreach. We have emails here, I will go and make a listserv, make sure everybody whose email is there, and then I need you guys, if you know somebody who's really interested, send me their email. I will make that listserv, and then we will be communicating via that to a wider audience. We will be a couple of meetings that will be in pipeline in the future, and we will be working in a better way of communicating our message here. So that's some work to do, but we are ready to work on it.
Yeah, I would endorse creative solutions.
Yes,
so that
creative solutions,
People
definitely.
who want to participate get the least expensive possibility that will work, and aren't
Right.
at the mercy of
Right.
whatever.
I see a lot of paper shuffling and rolling eyes, so I can tell it's time to wrap this up pretty soon.
Lunchtime.
But before we go, I just want to say, I guess there was talk of a technical advisory committee, which isn't going to happen, which is too bad. But I think it's great that you're doing this preliminary study, but I would encourage you to get as much community input before you get too far into it. I mean, I'm looking at this, okay, well, great, Fire Road leach field, that's good. But I know there's going to be something on the corner lot that's a series of pumps and some tanks, and that's a huge impact. You should talk to people in the valley before you say, well, here's what we're going to plan. Because that's, I mean, my personal feeling about the last time this whole thing went around was that everybody got a whiff of the fact that the golf course might work as this alternative system, and they just took off on a run. And the group's own statistics show that in the flats area, there was a lot of support. When you got to the upper flats, it dropped to 50%, I forget the exact numbers. And in San Geronimo, less than a quarter of the people were even interested in it. So that's really what I want to avoid seeing happening this time, where this thing just takes off and it's too late to do anything about it.
So quick question for you. So we are gonna find out the ways, but
I'm sorry.
do you know if we wanna reach out to the broader audience here,
Okay.
how can we, like, do you know how can we reach to all the people?
Well, we have
who-
300 people in our membership,
I sent that email, but
Yeah.
is it like, what's the timeline you need everybody to be like, they will be aware of the meeting? Like, what are the different possible ways that we can do?
I mean, how much notice? for
Yeah,
meetings?
yeah,
I'd
so
say 2 weeks minimum.
2 weeks minimum,
Minimum,
and
yeah,
then
as much
you
as
will-
possible.
Okay, and the planning, you have 300 members, through that email, I can reach out to 300
Yeah.
people. And what about the rest of the members? How can we come
Well,
together?
there's 300 registered members, and they can spread the word.
Okay,
There's
okay,
some- And then
awesome.
signs and
Okay,
those things.
so
I
that's
mean,
the best way.
And we
Best,
can
okay.
direct people to the,
Okay.
to your website
Okay.
too.
Awesome.
But again, I just get worried about this,
Yeah,
there's gotta be something on the
yeah,
corner lot, and I'd like to know what it is
yeah,
before the
sure,
final
sure.
thing comes down.
Yeah, sure, thank you so much. Ken.
Well, you're close enough. Thank you very much. We have this on film. Half of our
Yeah.
steering committee is not
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
They'll be able to see
Awesome.
and study that. And we
Okay.
will meet on this. And I
Okay.
can assure you, you'll get some comments.
Okay,
There,
yes,
uh,
yes.
Nancy
And,
reminded me, there's a
so
valid
we'd
list
be-
out here.
So
Was it
thank
the
you.
Yahoo?
Yeah.
Yahoo, we have posted on that too.
Okay,
That really
okay,
is good.
okay, that's good to know, yeah, that's because we want to reach out to each and, like, everybody here and make sure that this information is accessible and they can give us our feedback, because that's what's going to move the project forward.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, thank you so much for coming, and please have some donuts and coffee.